Hi, my name is Rebecca Evans, and this is my presentation for EDP4200 Assignment 2. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land which this presentation is being recorded upon, the Jagera, Yagara, and Yugarapal people, and would like to acknowledge their continuing connection to the lands, waters, and communities. During this presentation, the term First Nations may be used to respectfully refer to both Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. In this case, after reading Hammond's book, Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain, the principal has recognised a culture of low expectations towards First Nation students and understands the importance of culture that is fundamental to a child's thinking, beliefs, and actions. They have implemented some actions, however, they are not to be done in isolation, but rather in conjunction with all areas of the CRP framework to make a difference to student learning and not just a practice of multicultural education. Addressing Standard 6 of the APSTs, the leadership team acknowledges a problem of deficit thinking and overemphasis on closing the gap on achievement levels for First Nation students. With the problem and the need for professional learning identified, the principal read Hammond's book, Taking Notes for Improvement, engaged with colleagues to make changes, and implemented actions to address this area. This is a fantastic first step towards CRP. It is commendable that the admin team are critically analysing their practice and are aware of the implicit bias and culture of low expectations. In making up for past atrocities against First Nations people, the Australian government has implemented policies and agreements such as Closing the Gap, which, despite good intentions of striving for equality and equity in education, can be seen as attempts by superior white Australians to rescue and fix First Nations children. Policies like these are often overemphasized and can sometimes perpetuate the deficit thinking towards First Nations people. As Hammond's framework shows, we need to be aware of our own biases and reflect upon our own perspectives to identify when we are making assumptions about students based on culture or background and lowering expectations because of the need to dumb it down. This is not strengths-based and it is not CRP. The principal directs teachers to assess the relevance and representation of diverse cultures and backgrounds, namely First Nations cultures, within the school's curriculum planning. This step does address the cross-curriculum priorities of aiming to embed First Nations education within the school's curriculum planning, and is also aligned with the Alice Springs and Bandua education goals of ensuring local cultural knowledge and First Nations perspectives are a foundation of the Australian curriculum. But does it follow CRP? There are some links to the information processing area of the Ready for Rigor framework and will plant the seed for teachers to use cultural understanding to link new content. But again, this is only a small part of the framework and it misses the mark of pedagogy to challenge students, assist cognitive processing, and increase students' capacity for learning. Secondly, the principal asked teachers to display quotes and images to represent the diversity within the classroom. The intentions here are well-meaning and slightly aligned with CRP in the sense that students need to develop a positive identity and sense of self-efficacy within a classroom environment that is socially safe in order to learn. However, in isolation, this action won't make much of a difference. It is tokenistic and more of a multicultural education approach, celebrating the diversity of students within the classroom, which Hammond has stated is one of the top 4 misconceptions about CRP. Identified by Jackson in 1968, the hidden curriculum within the learning environment influences students. The principal of this school aims to counteract this by empowering students through positive representations in the classroom and creating a socially safe environment. However, this action is only surface level and it is deep cultural values that influence the brain's understanding of threats. So more would be needed than this action alone to create a safe learning space. In this last section, the principal further states the need for teachers to assess and develop skills and knowledge surrounding cultures of students within their classes. PIRSA 2012 acknowledges the importance of teachers cultivating and integrating knowledge, skills, and values of diverse cultures different to their own to develop a culturally competent teaching practice, which will be discussed in the amendments shortly. While this scenario has some starting points for implementing CRP, there are areas that have not been addressed, which are imperative for successful implementation. And that is an increased awareness and understanding of specific needs and strengths of learners, which are recognised through building relationships with students and their families to guide teaching and improve learning. This can be seen throughout Hammond's Ready for Rigor framework, particularly the learning partnerships component. So my recommendations to amend this school's approach focuses on 3 points: relationships, pedagogy, and professional thinking. All planning for teaching and learning stems from APST 1, knowing your students and knowing how they learn. This diagram from PIRSA shows the pedagogical approach for delivering the curriculum will be determined by the knowledge of students, and the individual experiences of the students will determine how knowledge is perceived and processed, how students behave, communicate, and interact with others, which all plays a role in deciding the best pedagogical approach for optimal student learning. So the best way to gain this student understanding is through building relationships. These teachers should engage in conversations both individually with students and in whole class discussions. This gives crucial information on planning and creates a safe space for students, which links with the first two of Hammond's brain rules. To begin this relationship building process, teachers could start the day with circle time, where students could share something important to them. This might not be suitable for all students who don't want to share aloud. So instead, students could write their contributions anonymously on paper to be shared aloud by their teacher. The next point is pedagogy. From Hammond's Ready for Rigor framework, the aspects that I found really important in terms of pedagogy were acknowledging how culture influences information processing, understanding new information can be delivered through different methods and cultural ways of learning. New information should be connected to students' existing funds of knowledge. Students' strengths and interests can be utilised to engage students for learning. High expectations should be maintained for all students, and appropriate challenges should be provided to stimulate brain growth and increase cognitive capacity. These points from the Ready for Rigor framework directly align with Hammond's brain rules from 3 through to 6. Teachers should focus on these points to align with the purpose of CRP, developing students' ability to learn independently and increase their learning capacity. An example of using cultural methods to deliver new information would be to use a framework such as Young-Porter's 8 Ways that suggests different methods such as sharing stories, symbolic and visual representation, authentic hands-on learning, and modelling and scaffolding to deliver learning content. And finally, as guided by Standard 6, teachers must engage in professional learning to develop their practice, which the principal has initiated. My suggestion would be to further engage with colleagues through a workshop such as this. This online course guides teachers through a process of personal reflection, foundational First Nations understanding, and practical suggestions for culturally responsive teaching. I would also strongly suggest they access this guide, which will assist them when they are selecting appropriate resources for teaching. As Skinner 1999 affirms, the pride and identity of First Nations students are diminished when they are not represented appropriately. By completing this course and utilising this guide together as a collegial team, staff can share their perspectives and findings to improve their understanding and improve their teaching practice.